Welcome, everyone. My name is Pete Van Epps, and welcome to the presentation, Master the Military to Business Transition. And so on behalf of the entire Cameron Brooks team, I want to welcome you to this presentation. The first thing I want to say is we at Cameron Brooks, we've been helping military officers transition from the military to corporate America for over 50 years. And so one of the questions I ask a military officer the first time I meet him or her is, why are you getting out of the military? A lot of times I'll ask the question like this: what problem will you solve by transitioning out of the military? Or another time, sometimes people will say, well, I don't really have a problem. I say, well, okay, well, what unmet need will you fulfill by transitioning out of the military? So I hear a lot of things, I'm getting out of the military because I'm looking for more of a merit-based promotion, or I'm looking for a better work-life balance or quality of life, or maybe a little bit more control over my career, what I do and when I do and how I do it. And ultimately, I want to grow professionally. I want to grow up in an environment where I can continue to grow and develop professionally. And so the point I want to make in that is, yeah, we get it. I myself, former military officer, and many of the people that I work with, former military officers, have very similar experience. We understand some of the reasons that military officers talk about in terms of getting out of the military. So that's what we're going to do today, right? So today what we'll do is I want to talk a little bit about your options. I want to help you to see and begin to set career goals and strategies. And I also want to talk about the difference in the search between just going and getting a job, a routine task performed in exchange for pay, versus a career. Now, a career is the natural progression of your professional life. So we'll get into that a little bit about myself very quickly. Former military officer myself, I graduated from the military academy and commissioned as a field artillery officer in the Army. Spent about 5.5 years in the military before making the move to corporate America. I partnered with Cameron Brooks and started my career at Johnson & Johnson. Had 4 different roles, primarily in business development functions over the course of about an 8 or so year time at Cameron Brooks, at Johnson & Johnson. And now I've been helping military officers move from the military to corporate America for a little over a decade. And so I like giving this presentation for a couple of reasons. One, I was a former military officer myself who made the transition. And two, I've helped a lot of military officers at this point in the game, and we as an organization has helped many more military officers at this point in the game. So I like talking about making the move and some of the things to think about. So I'm hoping today that as I describe some of the things that you might be thinking about, it'll be helpful in your search and what you're looking for. Here's how to get the most out of it. Ideally, you'd watch the whole thing from start to finish, not pressing pause, not going off and doing other things. Ideally, with minimal distraction. Perhaps you take this massively powerful device and put it off to the side just for a little while. If you have a spouse or significant other who will play a role in the transition, invite them. Maybe you press pause and ask your spouse or significant other to be a part of this, because a lot of what I'm going to say may resonate with them as well. And if you have questions, write them down. I'd like to answer them. It won't be in this one, obviously. This is a recording, but I'd like to answer it in the future conversations as we get there. A little bit about our team. We are headed up by our CEO, Chuck Alvarez, who has 27 years of helping military officers move from the military to corporate America. Our senior vice president is Joel Junker. Joel has 23 years of helping military officers move from the military to corporate America. And then Mary Lou White, who has 40 years. She's a principal in our organization, has 40 years of helping military officers. If you're ever interested, we have a podcast on iTunes and Spotify. A couple of episodes back, I interviewed Mary Lou, and we went through some of the history of Cameron Brooks and the 50 plus years, 40 of which she's been a serious part of. And then other principals in the organization, my Rob Davis, also a military academy grad, armor officer, mechanical engineer, who's been helping military officers move from the military to corporate America for a little over 12 years. And then my colleague, Lauren Kortzik, also a principal in the organization. She works primarily with Chuck, and those two together along with a couple other people, work with companies who are interested in bringing on this non-traditional talent, interviewing and bringing on what we like to say best athlete, high potential talent. That is the military officer who doesn't have, or probably doesn't have much, if any, business experience, but what they do bring to the table is a lot of leadership experience, and we'll certainly get into that as we get into it. So what do I do, and what does Joel and Rob do? What do we do as coaches? We want to partner with military officers who want to get into developmental positions within leading companies, and I'll describe both of those to you here in a moment. But what we talk a lot about with military officers is, first and foremost, setting goals, looking off a little bit into the future, and then a longer bit into the future, looking off a little bit, setting some goals, and then based on the goals, doing adequate and sufficient preparation to meet those goals, conduct a career search, avoid the missteps along the way in order to launch your career and successfully transition. And I'll describe some of that as we get into it. So that's what we'll do. I'll talk about why corporate America values you. We'll talk about some of the career options that you might have. And then I want to talk about some of the mistakes and missteps that I've seen other military officers move along the way. Definitely help you to understand how to avoid the largest misstep. And then we'll get into creating a strategy and basically getting into next steps. So let's talk a little bit about why corporate America values you. This is maybe the most important slide that I'm going to talk about today. It's certainly the most important concept that I'm going to talk about, why corporate America values you. And I'll get into all 4 points of these, all 4 points, the 3 Ps, your leadership advantage, your track record of success, and the ability to desire. But here's what I want you to take away from this slide. What corporate America is looking for is the development candidate. That's not a term you can go and Google. Roger Cameron, founder of our organization, coined that phrase many, many years ago. And a development candidate is someone who has the ability and the desire to rise to higher levels of leadership in corporate America. Not just get out of the military, not just go find a job, happenstance, go find a job somewhere. We're talking about someone who has the ability and the desire to rise to higher levels of leadership. I want to describe why corporate America values you in that way. And then I want to talk about some of the things, some of the sacrifices, some of the investment that it actually takes to make this hard pivot from the military, from the government, because right now you're a government employee, right? So what does it take to make the hard pivot from the military to corporate America and launch your career as a development candidate? So let's just first talk about what corporate America really likes about the military officer. Number one, and this slide and this concept was created years ago. We kept talking to military officers like, I don't know what value I bring. I just show up to work and I get things done, and I'm an officer and I put out fires and I basically get things done. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to help you see, you do get things done, but you do get things done in a few different ways. Number one, you lead people. Regardless if you have positional authority over someone or not, you're either leading directly, coach, train, mentor, develop, or you're leading in other ways. You're cross-functionally leading a team. Maybe it's your peers or bosses. So that would be up leadership and leading your bosses. You're leading through change. You're leading through influence. But anytime you're leading a group, again, whether you have positional authority over them or not, you are leading people. The next thing you do is you lead projects. Someone gives you a task. Someone gives you a desired outcome or an end state, and someone gives you a date. And then you start developing the resources, the timeline, the budget, all things that are required to deliver this project on time and to standard. You've done that over and over in your military career. And then the last thing is you solve problems. In the military, a lot of times we think problems are catastrophic, something that will prevent the organization from moving to the next level or the next thing that's on the agenda. And certainly that can be a problem, but a lot of times problems are inefficiencies in an organization. Let's say an organization is not is not performing at its ideal or its design level. And so what we'll do as military officers is we'll find and implement efficiencies that allow the organization to perform at its optimal level. So as a development candidate, what corporate America is looking from your leadership is people who know how to lead people, lead projects, and solve problems, the 3 Ps. The next thing about being a development candidate is you actually have a significant leadership advantage. So let me orient you to this graph very quickly. On the y-axis, your leadership experience, the experience you've had in leading, and obviously on the x-axis, we're going to do time in years post-college. But what I want to do is I want to contrast your experience against someone who got out, or graduated college and went straight into the workforce. There are multiple studies. Aon Hewitt has a very famous one, but there's multiple studies that talk about the average time someone changes companies in the first 4 years of employment is roughly about 3 times. Again, multiple studies prove this. As a matter of fact, companies will overhire college grads knowing that there's going to be churn, knowing that there's going to be starts and stops along the way, knowing that there's going to be some hiccups. But the thing about those college grads, and many of you know some of your friends who didn't join the military, yeah, maybe they had a little bumping along the way. But what happens around that 4 or 5 year mark is they get serious about, okay, I need to lead my career. And what happens is they start to exponentially rise in leadership experience. They stay with the same company, they take on more responsibility, they make sacrifices, they make investments in their career, they commit to their career. And what we see is an exponential rise in leadership experience in that group of people. Now, your experience is very different. Let's say this red line is your experience, because you didn't get to change companies. You stayed with the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard. You stayed. And what happens from a leadership experience, you immediately got into jobs where you were leading people, managing projects, and solving problems. Like day one in the military, in your first unit or organization, you immediately had leadership responsibility, which gave you great leadership experience. And you continue up and on that path. But what we see is there begins to be a tapering off. Notice this line is not flat. But what we experience is the type of leadership experience you have out here is similar to the type of leadership experience you have over there, similar but not the same, because the type of leadership right here is much larger in scope. So, but from an experience perspective, similar, different because it's larger in scope, but similar. And then notice, and I'll highlight this in a moment, but I want to bring it to your attention now, so when you see it, you'll know where I'm going with this. Notice there is a natural intersection in leadership experience, right? And so if you were going to stay in the military and stay on this red line, you too would see an exponential rise somewhere in that 14, 15, 16-year mark, where your leadership experience is much different in terms of the organization that you're leading. But there is this natural intersection at the 9, 10, 11, 12-year mark, where those in corporate America surpass those in the military in leadership experience in their industry. So in corporate America, we see a surpassing of leadership experience of the military, or the business professional against the military officer. But the thing I want you to take away from the graph is, before that intersection, there is a significant leadership advantage that the military officer has. And I would say the greatest advantage lies right about here. What we see is somewhere in that 7 to 8 year mark. That's really the top of our bell curve, or our normal distribution curve. We say that we see the most marketability. Now, I think if you're a 3 or 4 year officer, you had an OCS, OTS, or ROTC commitment, certainly there's an advantage. If you're a 9, 10 year officer, there's an advantage as well. But I would say the fat part of the bell curve is somewhere in that 7 year, 8 year mark, something like that, in terms of what we see in terms of leadership advantage. So let's keep talking about the development candidate, and I want to talk about the non-development candidate as well. And you know what? Let me start with the non-development candidate. So before I get into this, this is not right and wrong. This is not good and bad. These are just different. My intention is not to bring some kind of moral equivalency to these things. They're not good and bad, right and wrong. They're just different, okay? And so the non-development candidate is a subject matter expert. where he or she is getting hired based on their resume and their functional experience. So it usually takes fewer interviews, usually a higher starting salary, but usually lower upside. The classic example I like to give is my neighbor, Mike. I went to West Point. He went to Navy. He lives two doors down from me. He's a very good friend of mine for 51 weeks out of the year. And Mike is a pilot at a major airline. He flew for the Navy. He got out of the Navy. He moved to his hometown where we live, and he flies for a major airline. Subject matter expert, being hired because he knows how to fly something. He told me he literally had one interview with a person he already knew where he's a higher starting salary, but he doesn't want to be the CEO of his airline. As a matter of fact, he doesn't even want to get promoted. I think he already has captain status, and he's like, I'm good with what I've got. I'm not interested in going any higher. I like my quality of life. I like what I do. I like where I live. I'm good with what I've got. Classic example of a non-development candidate. Other examples might be, let's say you have let's say you were a military intelligence officer, or you've done, analysis, and you have a top secret SCI clearance. It'd be easy to transition that skill set over to, let's say, being an analyst for the FBI. That's another example. Whereas a development candidate is different. The development candidate has the ability and the desire to rise to higher levels of leadership in an organization. So a development candidate is the future directors, the future VPs, the future C-suite executives in an organization. And so when corporate America is hiring a military officer for the development candidate role, they're looking for a broad set of experience. They're looking at the quality of your experience. The questions are more like how than what. How do you lead? Why do you do it that way? Because they're trying to evaluate your future potential to be a director in their organization. Many interviews, a lot of times, and this is really our model as well, we'll see an officer engage in 8, 9, 10, sometimes they'll meet up to 20 people for one position at one company in an initial interview, and a follow-up interview process. And it has to be unanimous, you all. It has to be unanimous because you're going to be a director in this company. So what we see is an equivalent salary. Actually, it's usually a little bit more than what you're making now, slightly more or a little bit more. But what we also see is a much higher upside in compensation. If you don't believe me, go to any publicly traded company's 10K. That's their annual statement, and just go look at the executive compensation, and you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about in terms of higher upside. And then location, we'll talk about location. I haven't skipped over that necessarily, but with a development candidate or non-development, like my neighbor Mike, he doesn't, his hub, I guess, in his airline isn't in our little town. He's got to drive and fly to where he starts his commute, or where he starts his shift or whatever. But he lives where he wants to live. I would say, as a development candidate, if you're going to be a director in the organization, certainly have preferences, but you want to be careful with the restrictions, because that can be a significant governor on your ability to be a development candidate, at least in the initial phases. So I love this picture of an old boat, obviously. And the analogy we like to say around here is that analogy of Hernan Cortez. You've heard this analogy before, the burn the boats. You usually hear it like sports coaches give it in locker rooms and things like that. But we like it a lot around here because we feel like that's what companies are looking for in the military officer who wants to be a development candidate. You know how the story goes, right? Hernan Cortez comes from the old world to the new world, lands on the Yucatan Peninsula, and as it goes, all his crew gets off the boat, and what does he do? He burns it, or he sacks it, or he sinks it. Right? Companies are looking for military officers who are willing to commit with this ability and the desire to grow to higher levels of leadership in the organization, to be a development candidate. They're looking for that. They don't want you to have ships in the harbor. Hey, I need a job, but I also have an application into the FBI, or there's a chance I might go back to the military if this doesn't work out. They're looking for, hey, this is my plan. This is plan A, and I don't have another plan. I am coming to corporate America. Now, there's one caveat to this. I get asked this question all the time. Does this include the traditional reserves, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks out of a year? That's not what I'm talking about. If you have a desire to serve in the reserves, that's a personal decision based on all the factoring criteria that you've got to evaluate in that. But I'm not talking about the reserves. This is what you'll do for your full-time job outside of the military. And again, what companies are looking for, this really isn't my slide. This should be the company's slide, because what they're looking for is those who have burned the ships, who have the ability and the desire to rise to higher levels of leadership. So that's the development candidate. That's why corporate America wants you. I mean, it's a logical question. The roles that we represent are typically filled by people with industry and company experience. We don't represent college hire jobs. We represent experienced business hires. So the logical question is, why would a company want to come hire a non-traditional candidate? Someone who spent 4 years in college learning about the military and preparing for the military, someone who's been in the military 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years as a government employee and really knows that. Why would corporate America come to you? The reason they do is they got two problems, and the development candidate solves both. They have an open position that's currently unfilled that brings value to the organization, and two, they are looking to build and grow their leadership bench for future leaders in the organization. And that's just such an important concept. Okay, let's talk a little bit about career field. Let's say you say, hey, I'm a development candidate. I want to get into corporate America. What kinds of things could I get into? 4 main career fields. We'll go into each of them. Number 1, business analysis. So business analysis, the type of leadership you exert is cross-functional leadership, process leadership, project leadership, a lot of collaboration. And so a lot of data, using data. A lot of times people think, oh, business analysis, I'm going to be stuck behind a computer in the basement. That's not business analysis at all. It's very collaborative. It's cross-functional. It's quantitative and data-oriented. So some of the job titles: consulting, business operations analyst, finance, IT project management. Those are just some pretty basic titles. But the thing about business analysis, a lot of the times when a company comes to us looking for an experienced hire business analysis, they want to know that you have something in your background that demonstrates your quantitative ability. So a lot of times that comes in the form of a degree. It doesn't always have to come in the form of a degree. It could be in the form of your experience in the military, but usually there's a quantitative component to the idea of business analysis. Next, team leadership. This is the leading a team of people who report to you: coaching, training, mentoring, developing, casting a vision, and then holding your team accountable to hit that vision and hit that goal and deliver on results. That's traditional team leadership. And we see it a lot of times in an operational environment: manufacturing, distribution, transportation, build, make, source, deliver. I said that wrong. Source, build, make, deliver. And then the other one, as it relates to team leadership, is the general management. That's set apart a little bit because that's one level up in experience. And so usually the general management type of role is reserved for people with 8, 9 years of experience in the military, because it's a little bit of a higher team leadership. Usually in general management, you're leading a team, but you also manage a profit and loss, call that P&L. And then typically there's also a customer involved, not all the time, but it's just, again, a little bit higher of a thing. Next, engineering management. So engineering management is as it sounds. It's using your technical background. Typically you have an engineering or a STEM degree, and using your technical background in a few different ways. You can either be leading a team. So that's pretty broad in this way. You could either be leading a team, you could be managing programs or projects, or you could be out in front of customers, sometimes in a sales role, but often more in a sales application engineering type of role. So some of the roles we represent: manufacturing engineer, quality engineer, new product development, and application sales engineer. The misnomer about engineering is it's all about design work. I'm going to be sitting at my desk doing CAD designs all day. That's not really it. That is engineering, but it's not engineering management. That's more of a non-developmental function. And what we're talking about is developmental in nature. It's leadership in nature, using your technical background. And the fourth category, and this is certainly the most misunderstood category, is business to business sales. And so business to business sales is all about managing a geographic territory. So there's a lot of account management in there, where you're seeing customers on a regular basis. You're building rapport, earning their trust, demonstrating your credibility, and ultimately to help them be more efficient and more productive in corporate America, in their market. So you're using your relationships in order to earn their trust, which allows you to demonstrate your credibility in order to basically solve their problems with a product or a service or both that allows them to flourish. The thing about sales is, or the thing that military officers like about sales is, one, it's autonomous. It's like running a business within a business. And the second thing is you're rewarded for your results. Most of the business sales we represent come with a base salary. Usually that's more than enough to live off of, but the upside is great because based on your performance, you get paid on top of your base salary. So there's a lot of room to run financially in a job like this. The misunderstanding, though, is people think it's a business to consumer selling. And what is consumer selling? It's very transactional. You've heard, the door-to-door salesman or the used car or, selling a cell phone at a kiosk at a Costco or something like that. And it's transactional. It's high pressure because I got one chance to sell you. And if I don't sell you, you're gone and I have to go try someone else. Business to business sales, the foundation of the sell is the relationship. So it's very different and just much different than business to consumer selling. The only type of sales we represent are business sales. So here's some of the titles: sales leading to management, account management, territory management. So those are the big four. If you want to know a little bit more about that, you can go to our website, Cameron-Brooks.com, hover over this JMO moniker, and then click on career options, and just a little bit more that you can help to learn, hey, what's out there and what could I potentially be a fit for? Now, let's talk about this wedding cake. I talked about the general management earlier. I said one level up. I was about to say one level up on the wedding cake because that's how I typically say it, but I know I hadn't shown this to you yet. But let's talk about the ideal career trajectory. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about your career like a wedding cake. And so your career, I mentioned this when we first started, your career is the natural progression of your professional life, as opposed to a job, which is a routine task performed in exchange for pay. So if you think about the ideal natural progression of your professional life, career trajectory, think about it this way: wedding cake, big beefy layer, military experience, where you're gaining that leadership experience 4 to 10 years. The next job out of the military is so important. We call that the transition layer. And usually a transition takes 3 to 5 years, where you're getting to something that's intellectually challenging, meaningful, something where you can use your skill set in an industry-leading company and allow you to build a track record of success. A lot of times I'll ask someone, hey, define transition for me. And they say, yeah, the transition is, when I get off of terminal leave and the first day in my job, when I start working at my new job and my new company. I would like to challenge that a little bit. I want you to think about the transition a little bit differently. The way I want you to think about transition is you're going to change the way you market yourself. Okay, change the way you're going to market yourself. So right now, as a military officer contemplating getting out of the military, how will you market yourself? Well, you'll market yourself this way: I'm a military officer with a track record of leadership experience in the military, and I have a lot of potential for future leadership in corporate America. So military officer with leadership experience in the military with lots of potential. But after your transition, a successful 3 to 5 years after making the move to corporate America, it'll be different the way you market yourself. At that point in the game, you're marketing yourself this way: I am an experienced business professional who has a skill set in corporate America and a track record in corporate America, who happened to come from the military. And I'm telling you, if you can get this right, if you can get this successful transition right, what happens is you get to rise. Remember, ability and desire to rise to higher levels of leadership, general management, VP and director, to executive. And it's funny, the longer you rise in a corporation, the less amount of time you spend as you continue to drive up the wedding cake. So if this is interesting to you and you see yourself as a development candidate, this is the way that you should be thinking when you start thinking about goal setting. This is the way you should be thinking about the ideal trajectory. Now, unfortunately, and again, I've been doing this for over a decade, so I've seen people get this wrong, get the ideal trajectory wrong. So let me explain some of the ways or some of the missteps that I see. The first misstep that I see is kicking the can down the road. And it usually comes in the verbal form of this. I say, hey, are you thinking about getting out of the military? Or I'm on the phone with someone who's thinking about it. And I say, well, what would keep you in? And they say things like, well, it depends what my next job is. It depends what my detailer or my monitor or my branch manager is going to show me, because if it's in the right location, or if I don't have to work as hard because the op tempo is a little bit lower, maybe I'll consider staying in. Well, that's interesting if you're thinking about staying in your military career until a 20+ year career. But if you're thinking like after that assignment, I'll get out of the military, there's some implications that may be not as positive in terms of what you're thinking. One of those implications, and I remember I highlighted the upper right-hand quadrant of that leadership experience graph early, there is a natural intersection in a military officer's leadership experience. If you desire to get into corporate America, there's a natural intersection where you'll continue past that. Remember, that's that 9 to 12. I don't want to say it's a specific year because it just kind of depends on factors, right? But it's that 9 to 12 year experience. And a lot of times if that happens, what someone will do is they'll find themselves hanging out over here thinking, I want to go back. I want to get on this curve. And a lot of times that's what it requires. It requires a little backwards movement in terms of responsibility or pay or other things like that. Here's the thing I want to talk about in terms of kicking the can down the road. Here's a few factors that you may appreciate. And you can go to this right here, BLS.gov, talks about inflation, it talks about recession. The unemployment rate right now is hovering at, it's under 4, and it's just been fluctuating under 4, which is amazing because we're facing headwinds right now with inflation and the interest rate as high as it is here. We're in early April of 2023, and we're facing headwinds, but it's so amazing to me how the unemployment rate has continued to stay under 4%. 4% is what most economists call full employment. It's a number. It's a transactional number because no one is ever, everyone's not all employed at the same time. There's always kind of coming and going. So full employment is generally 4%. So we've stayed under that, which is good. That's actually a very interesting number. But here's the interesting number to me. This number, hold on, let's go back. This number of 1.9, that's the unemployment rate of someone that's 25 years or age or older with a college degree. So that really fits just about every JMO, junior military officer, considering getting out of the military. The thing that I think is important to appreciate is there's a few generations at play here. The baby boomer generation, those were born from 1940 to 1960, about 70 million of those still in the workforce. Probably less than that now. The next generation, my generation, that's Generation X, and we were born from 1960 to 1980. There's about 45 million or so of us in the workforce, and then the next generation is your generation, Generation Y, or the millennials. And of course, there's over 70 million of you in the workforce. So there's this natural dip between the baby boomer, numerically, the baby boomers, the Generation Xers, and the millennials. And so it's important to appreciate companies don't stop hiring military officers. And if baby boomers are reaching retirement age, doesn't mean they're retiring, but a lot of them are reaching retirement age at the rate of 10,000 a month, there is a natural gap in leadership. It's really the perfect storm of why corporate America is so interested in the military officer. Here's a fact. During the COVID year, or the initial COVID year, that's 2020, we did not cancel a conference. We had a conference in April of 2020, of June of 2020, August of 2020, and November of 2020. So we do 5 conferences a year. I mentioned 4. We also do one in January. Obviously, in January of 2020, we didn't know exactly what was going on with COVID. But the important point I want to tell you is we didn't cancel a conference in 2020 or in 21 or in 22 or so far this year in 23. As a matter of fact, we've never canceled a conference. When I saw that with my own eyes 3 years ago, I thought, short of Armageddon, corporate America will never stop hiring the military officer because they value your leadership experience so much that even in the highest of economic uncertainty, in the most recent time was in April and June of 2020, even in the highest of economic uncertainty, companies are looking for the military officer. So in terms of kicking the can down the road, look, I'm not telling you to get out of the military. You have to do what's right for you, and you have to do it right for your family. But in terms of kicking the can down the road, I would be careful with that. I'm not saying you hurry up and submit your resignation, but at least start to explore. Don't let the headwinds, don't let the economy, don't let the news cycle scare you into doing something or not doing something. Take it into your own hands and evaluate what's right for me, what's right for my family, where should I be taking it next? So in terms of solution, let me back up with that. Start to take it into your own hands. Learn a little bit about corporate America. I want to highlight this book right here, PCS to Corporate America. It's our book, written by Roger Cameron, co-authored by our CEO, Chuck Alvarez, and our Senior Vice President, Joel Junker. This book literally has 80 years worth of military officer transition experience chocked full. It is a guidebook. It is a handbook. We sell that book on Amazon. You can buy it for 12, 15 bucks. And every penny that doesn't go to Amazon, and some of those pennies go to Amazon, we donate to the Nimitz Foundation. That's a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Fredericksburg, Texas, focused on furthering military causes. We're completely not tied to the Nimitz Foundation. But the reason I think that's so important is because I want you to buy this book, but not so I can get rich on book sales. Again, I'm donating it to a nonprofit. But what I want you to do is I want you to buy it because it will be a handbook. I want you to do other things as well. Check out a book called Good to Great, published in 2001. It's ubiquitous in corporate America. And really, Jim Collins, what he does is he talks about companies that do things that move them from good companies to great companies. You can check out my man Carl Quintanilla on a show called Squawk on the Street, comes on CNBC right after Squawk Box, which is another great show that you can learn a lot about business. But start immersing yourself in the business culture to learn about things, learn about companies, learn about markets, learn about trends, learn about disruptors, learn about strategies. Man, there's so much out there like at our disposal that we just have, we can tap into very easily. So the solution to kicking the can down the road is take things into your own hands. I want you to, of course, leverage our resources. We're a military officer company that helps military officer transition, but we act like a media company sometimes because we put out content. We have almost 170 episodes of a podcast that we publish every other week. We've got an extensive library of videos on our YouTube channel. We publish to a blog every other week. We've got multiple free transition resources, all at your fingertips, all free to you, other than PCS, which I've already talked about, all free to you in order to learn as much as you can about the transition. So what's the takeaway? I'm going to do this a couple of times to you today. Number one, ask these questions of yourself. What does a successful career, natural progression of your professional life, what does a successful career look like to you? Where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years? What kind of work are you doing and what kind of environment are you in? When you start asking yourself those questions, you'll start to really see, okay, what do I need to be doing today, right now, in order to get to a place where I'm satisfying the answers to those questions for you? Because I don't want to answer those questions for you. You've got to answer those questions yourself. The second misstep I see, lack of preparation. I see this all the time. Military officers think that their military experience is sufficient preparation to make the move from the military to corporate America. I would vehemently argue, that indeed is not the case because you have two main hurdles. The first hurdle that you have is there's just so much information out there, you guys. I mean, you books and family and media and coworkers and spouses and friends and in your own head sometimes, like there's so much information out there. And so what we try to do here at Cameron Brooks is we try to take and distill down all of this massive amount of information into the development and preparation program and take the relevant information that is required to help you make the move from the military to corporate America in a preparation perspective. Here's the other hurdle. The bottom line of this 4x4 grid, you are busy. And so a lot of times, and I chuckle at that because I know how busy you are. And so a lot of times military officers will say to me, I'm going to wait until I have a little bit more time. Usually that's in the form of a starting terminal leave. I'm going to wait until I have a little bit more time to prepare. The challenge is typically that's not enough time. If you wait until your military op tempo is low, the average amount of time that someone spends in our program is about a year. I partner with people that are 2-3 years from getting out of the military. I partner with people who are 2-3 months from getting out of the military. But I would say if you want to do yourself justice, don't wait. There are things to learn. There's concepts to understand. There's things you've got to connect in terms of your experience and your marketability and how it relates to corporate America. It's not just like, hey, I was a company commander or I was a platoon commander. It's doing the adequate preparation to ensure you get to a place where when it's time for you to start interviewing, you're prepared to do so. So here's one of the challenges that I see, and I'm kind of talking about this. One of the things we know is the military success certainly equals business success. We literally have thousands of data points to prove that. But what we also know is military success does not necessarily equal transition success. And unfortunately, we have some data points to prove that as well. Here's what we see in the interview itself. So the importance of communicating your background effectively. Let's say we've got two officers, Officer A and B, and you'll see that these red blocks basically represent the resume, your objective assets. And let's say in this case, Officer A is just a little bit more stacked, if you will. Maybe he or she went to a more recognizable school. Maybe they have a more relevant undergraduate or graduate degree. Maybe they've done different things in the military that are just more relevant to the job they're interviewing for. But here's the key that I want to tell you. You have interview potential, and the interview potential is your resume plus your communication experience, your level of preparation. And sometimes I see really stacked resumes or people with really stacked resumes interview at that level. And maybe people that don't have, they're still qualified for the job. Both of these officers are interviewing for the same job, but maybe someone that doesn't have that level of experience, but they are prepared to communicate their background. That is, explain what they've done in such a way where one, companies understand what they're talking about, and two, can see a clear picture of how their experience relates directly to the role for which they're interviewing. And sometimes I see officers without a stacked resume interview more or higher or better, let me back up, than someone with a better resume. And when the company goes for this officer, which almost invariably they do, they don't say, I think they had the best resume. They don't say that. What they say is, this person is a better fit for our organization and what they're looking for. Unfortunately, the thing they say about Officer A is they looked really good on paper. They looked really good on paper, but ultimately just weren't a fit for what we were looking for. And I think that's an important part. The third misstep is balancing the extrinsic factors of the transition versus the intrinsic. And I'm going to explain both of them. But before I do, let me just say this to you. I recognize that both of these are important. Okay. Trust me, I transitioned from the military in 2003, and some of these things like location, compensation, job title, perks, those are the things that are like, that's what initially attracted me to corporate America. But I also want to tell you, now that I've been doing this for over 20 years now, the things that ultimately held me in corporate America were company culture. and what I was doing and the way I was able to grow and the relationship I had with my boss and team and the access to mentorship opportunities and development opportunities, those are really the things that held my attention over time. So please don't hear me say this is unimportant. I recognize full well everything on this screen is really important. But what I will say is these are the things that typically initially attract people, and these are the things that initially hold people. And what you want to be thinking is, what is important? This is obvious to you, right? You already know the answer to all these questions for the most part. This probably not as obvious yet, but those are the things that are ultimately going to hold your attention. Let's talk a little bit about location. Location is something that I talk a lot about with military officers. 2x2 grid. Over here, quality of the opportunity. Let's say A-tier company versus B-tier company. A-tier company is leading in their industry. A-tier company is recognized. A-tier company is where everyone wants to be, because A-tier company is where it's at. It's where you want to work. You're proud to work there. You're proud to tell people that you work there. That's an A-tier company. And then ideal location. I know my ideal location. I can't define yours, obviously, but your ideal location or A-tier location versus where am I willing to start? And here's the thing. Look, let me back up. We all want that, don't we? We all want the A-tier company in the best location that's right for me and my family. What I know about corporate America is corporate America does not like hiring, or let me just say it this way, A-tier. I'm sorry, let me back that up. A-tier companies, and I came from an A-tier company. I feel like I'm an A-tier company. I am in an A-tier company now. But I also came from another A-tier company. I'm going to tell you right now, A-tier companies do not like hiring from B-tier companies. I was a former hiring manager at Johnson & Johnson. I play an active role in hiring at my company now. I'm telling you right now, A-tier companies do not like hiring from B-tier companies. But a lot of times what I'll find military officers do is they'll say, I don't care where I work. I just need to be in the right location. I don't care where I work, A-tier location. I just need to be in the right location, right? So it's stifling. This extrinsic factor is stifling. So we all want to be in the A-tier company in the A-tier location, but a lot of times, it's important. Think about it this way. Like when you transition, you are writing a book. And a lot of times I see military officers spend all their time, energy, and effort in the very next chapter. I want to work here. I want to live here. I want to do this. And I'm not saying that's important. I married my high school sweetheart. We grew up in the same town. We went to the same high school. When I got out of the Army, we were talking a lot about moving home. Trust me, I get it. But if you're a development candidate or you see yourself as a development candidate, think about the book you're writing. You're not just writing the next chapter of your book. You're trying to write like 10 chapters from now, 15 chapters from now, 20 chapters from now. And remember what we talked about in terms of the successful transition. A successful transition is changing the way you market yourself from military officer with potential to business leader with a skill set who happen to come from the military. And I'm not telling you have to like this, and I'm not telling you even have to do this, but if you see yourself as a development candidate, I would encourage you to think about this next move as your investment. And you know what? You might get to your A-tier location in your A-tier company, and that would be great. I would say a lot of military officers experience that. I'm not saying you're relegated to an A-tier company in a B-tier location, but what I'm saying is like, see the long view. Like, yeah, you're writing chapter, whatever this next chapter is for you. Let's say it's chapter 8. You're writing chapter 8, but what about chapter 30? You're not even to the second half of your book yet. And so just be real careful. If you see yourself as a development candidate, start to adapt and adopt the investment mindset. What does it take to make the move from a completely different industry, the government and military, and hard pivot into the industry that I want to not only be in, but I also want to lead in as a director and hire longer term? It's that investment mindset that really differentiates candidates in the interview process. Let's talk a little bit about some of the consequences. So here's the consequence, and it really is all about narrowing down. Let's say this blue circle is the entire market, and you start intentionally and proactively narrowing down. I'm only interview for jobs that are related to my academic major, and I only want to do it in the town that I want to do it in, and I only want to make a certain amount of money. What we see is this natural narrowing down, and the challenge when you narrow down opportunities, what you find yourself is increasing the opportunity that you'll misstep, increasing the opportunity that you're going to get into an opportunity that's not right for you. And if you get into an opportunity that's not right for you, what are you going to do? Most likely, you're going to leave, and you're going to try again, and you're going to try again, and you're going to try again until you find the right thing. And so what I'm encouraging you to do is, yes, extrinsic. It's important. Trust me, I understand. It's important. What else is important, though? A lot of times that intrinsic is is ultimately more important because it's going to hold your attention over time. Right, to cover those points, I'm just on the soapbox here. Let's talk a little bit about the misnomer that all companies view JMOs equally. I don't think that's true whatsoever. So we see three ways to transition. The first way to transition out is to transition out and down. That is, get into a job that quite frankly, you could have done 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, usually at a lower paying salary. Typically what we see when military officers transition out and down, it is because of location. Not always, not always. Sometimes it's just lack of knowledge about what you're actually marketable for and what you're actually competitive for. So that could be a factor as well. But a lot of times we'll see it because of location. The second way we see people transition is out and across. Usually that's in the form of a functional hire, like my neighbor Mike, the pilot, going, hey, I know how to fly something. I'm going to get out of the military and go fly something. Again, let me say, because I don't want to get accused of this, that's not wrong or bad. No morality. That's not a moral decision whatsoever. But we see people transition out in that functional skill. The only way that we represent transitioning is transitioning out. That is, getting off the red line and getting onto the blue line and accelerating your career as a development candidate. It's really the only way that we see transition. Here's a consequence of what I'm talking about. In December of 2019, LinkedIn published this Veterans Opportunity Report. And the Veterans Opportunity, this was their publication, not ours, their study, not ours. 33% of veterans are unemployed and 70% take a step back. Next, let's talk about getting caught in the filters. So here are a couple of, well, hold on, I'm clicking away over here. Let me orient you and then we'll look at that. So these are the filters I'm describing. Let's say you're going to do a job search. You need to post your resume. Someone's going to screen your resume, or really a computer is going to screen your resume nowadays. If it gets through the computer screening, an HR generalist or HR business professional is going to look at it, and he or she is going to pass along a select few of interviews to the hiring manager for an interview and an in-depth. So we see for both skilled and unskilled labor, approximately 250 applications a year. Here's what I want to tell you. Here's what I want to show you. Hopefully you'll find this interesting. I got 2 job descriptions from jobs that we've represented. And Megan, do me a favor, just hit the cut button and let them see this so they can read it effectively. So bachelor's degree, this is requirement. Bachelor's degree for accounting, finance, econ, business, MBA preferred, 3 years of relevant experience working in the financial industry, must have proven record experience managing operations in a consulting firm. So that's one. So that is a job that we represent. And some of you may think, okay, I don't really have that experience. I've been in the military. Another one, and Megan's going to do this again, minimum 3 years of finance, accounting, or related experience required. Experience with regulatory requirements such as Sarbanes-Oxley or GAAP is required. That's important to appreciate because, again, those are jobs that we see and represent. Businesses will go outside of their normal hiring practices in order to find the non-traditional candidate. But a lot of times, if someone's going about it on their own, they're going to get caught in the filters. 98% of resumes get caught up in the computer screen. If you're one of the lucky ones, and a few of the lucky ones, the HR business professional is going to take over, and he or she is going to screen for who? The hiring manager, the decision maker. This is where Cameron Brooks starts. Between the hiring manager and the follow-up interview process. And the thing I want you to highlight is this process typically takes 1 to 3 months. Whereas once the hiring manager interview starts, we're talking about 18 working days from start to finish. So that's an important concept. But the thing I want you to take away, you JMOs, me when I was in your shoes, we make up less than 1% of the working population. What does that mean? It means our experience is very non-traditional. It means that companies don't see every JMO the same, and it means that it's easy to get caught in the filters that I'm describing. Here's the biggest misstep of all, and here's what I want you to think about. Remember what I talked about, the wedding cake and the successful transition? Well, unfortunately, I see people make multiple singular or multiple missteps, and they find themselves bouncing around. One of the biggest detriments that you can have in your move from the military to corporate America is that misstep. Because the challenge is eventually when you try to find the thing that's right, a hiring manager is going to look at your military experience, which is not related, and they're going to look at you, starting and stopping 2 or 3 times thinking, how do I know if this person is committed to what I'm doing? It's so much better to stop doing this, to focus on the successful transition if you consider yourself a development candidate. So remember this slide right here? I talk about military officers getting out for merit-based promotion, quality of life, control over their career, and potential growth. Let me tell you how we, Cameron Brooks, how we help with that. And listen, you have a lot of options right here. You can go to job fairs. The DoD has created what they call the skill bridge. In the Army, it's called the CSP, which, by the way, we are a skill bridge provider. We have a memorandum of understanding from the DoD, which allows us to provide a skill bridge to officers if that's something that's interesting to you. But you have internships you can do, and you can use your own network. You can go to job boards. You can use recruiting firms. We don't call ourselves a recruiting firm. We call ourselves a transition partner. Here's what I mean by that. The value of what we do is we basically help you to avoid the missteps through an in-depth development and preparation program, which I've talked about, but I'll mention again, and through a career conference and follow-up interview process, which I'll explain. The development and preparation program is one of a kind, and it's basically grounded in 4 key pillars. We help you learn how to interview. We help you write a resume. We help you to expand your business knowledge, and we help you to learn about the different career fields that are out there that, 1, you're marketable for, but 2, that you can talk about your experience in order to be really effective in interviewing. So our DPP is important because it has 4 main pillars that you can use to be real successful in your interview. And then from a conference, we do 5 conferences a year: January, April, June, August, and November. And we always start at 6 o'clock at night Central on a Friday, and we finish up late in the day on a Tuesday. All of our conferences are virtual. We actually do it in the studio that I'm in right now. So we'll do virtual conferences. So Friday, we're kicking off for a couple of hours at 6 o'clock at night. And then all day Saturday and Sunday, you're in briefings, mostly learning about the companies you're going to interview with. And then on Monday and Tuesday, you're interviewing, typically 4, 5, 6 interviews on Monday, and then 4, 5, 6 interviews on Tuesday. On Tuesday night, when you're done, you'll take that list of 10, 12 companies, and you'll chop it in half, basically, and you'll say, here are the 4 or 5 companies that I want to do a follow-up interview with. And so the follow-up interview is a 2 to 3 week process where you're meeting with companies. Now, the follow-up interview process is when they're buying you a plane ticket and you're going to meet them face-to-face. So the conference, virtual. Follow-up, in person, or at least hybrid. Some are virtual, some are in person. Here's the thing about it. Other strategies, or you going out on your own, lots of churn, lots of irons in the fire, where you're trying to sync everything up, trying to get as many offers as you can in that tight timeline in order to get an offer. One offer, a lot of times. Here's our career search strategy. Evaluate numerous courses of action. Explore and compare the trade-offs. Look at all of your options in order to make a successful transition. That's the change in the way you market yourself, and ultimately get to that director level and higher. That is really the Cameron Brooks search and the Cameron Brooks process. This is a fun slide. I was about to say important slide. This is a fun slide. This is a career conference from a couple of years back. And these boxes represent the different types of career fields that this person represented. So just to kind of run through this, engineering, business analysis, team leadership, sales, business analysis, engineering, team leadership, sales, team leadership, engineering. I'm not saying your schedule has to look like that, but there is such a value and such a power when you can compare so many things. Why? Because it's not just about the functional nature of what you're going to do. There's so many other things at play. Culture of the company, the relationship you're going to have with your future boss and team, the opportunity to grow, the access to mentorship and development opportunities. So when you can compare a lot of opportunities, there is so much power in that. We even call it that, the power of comparison. There's so much power in comparing, these opportunities. So what we're trying to do is help you to do a successful transition. Here's a couple of numbers I get asked. 95% of officers who attend a career conference earn offers. 90% of those offers are at place. 98% of officers who come to this program are still at their same company at 1 year, avoiding the missteps and do-overs, and 93% are still there 3 years. That is a proven track record of launching a career and transitioning effectively. The next thing I'll tell you, it's not just about getting out of the military and going to work. We have a powerful alumni network with professional services, alumni video series. We write letters of recommendation, ongoing career counseling. I was on the phone yesterday morning for about 45 minutes with a guy who came through this program 8 months ago, who was working through something. And he said, hey, can we get on the phone? Sure, no problem. Found some time very quickly, and it helped to coach him and mentor him through that, all free of charge. And certainly I've done this more times than I can count, helping military officers in their promotion or in their interview for their promotion into that next role as they successfully transition. So it's not just about coming to a conference and finding a job. It's about walking alongside you for the balance of your career. So second most important slide I'm going to tell you, here are the questions you should be thinking about based on all that information. By leaving the military, what problem are you trying to solve? Remember what I said, if you don't have a problem, what unmet need are you trying to fill? How does transitioning solve that problem or meet that unmet need? And if it does, how does it do that? What does it look like for me 3 to 5 years? Define the successful transition as best you can in your world and through your eyes. Are you interested in being a development candidate, or do you want it to be a development candidate? I know I keep saying this, but there's no right or wrong in that. You have to find what's right for you. What about career field options? I can say that most of you, probably all of you listening to my voice, you have marketability in more than one option. So start thinking about some of the things you're marketable in, and then what strategy is right for you. How should you do that? What I'd like to do with you is I'd like to have a conversation. We'll call it the personal marketability assessment, but in that we'll talk about your goals, the strategy that you want to employ to achieve those goals. We'll certainly talk about marketability in corporate America, and we'll talk about how Cameron Brooks can help you. So if you'd like to do that, here's a couple of things I want you to do. Number one, be extremely thorough with the Cameron Brooks profile. If there is room to write. If it's not applicable, write NA, but give me as much as you can initially so I can give you a fair evaluation on your marketability. I'd like to see all of your evaluations, even your non-observed and school evaluations, so I can get a sense of your experience and your performance. I'd like a copy of your undergraduate and graduate transcript, even if they're unofficial. I want to see what classes you took, how you did, and some of your academic background. And I ultimately want to talk about your plans and your goals and how you want to get there and help in that. Okay, so that's it. Now, this is a Q&A slide. The reason we write that is because I want you to think about any other questions that you have. I want to meet you for this conversation. No, hold on. That conversation. And when I do, if you have any specific questions that I wasn't able to answer or anything that are particularly pertinent to you, I want you to bring those to the conversation, and I want to certainly help in any way I can. Okay, so that's it. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you sticking through this entire presentation. I look forward to meeting you face to face, and have a great day.